So, dear and respected friend, thank you so much for your kind participation. So let me start today's session with an invocation, a speech, I would say, of Sarpalli Radhakrishnan. So let me just share the screen, please.
If we have to build a world without arms, a world of peace, a fellowship of nations, it can only be on the basis of the three fundamental principles of political freedom for all, economic opportunity for all, and creative freedom for all. Nations are here to help one another. It is selfishness, it is indolence, it is inertia, it's a perverse fastidiousness that makes nations look upon themselves as closed entities. Such a kind of perverse chauvinistic nationalism, which makes us look upon our neighbors as aliens to us, has no justification. Nothing human is alien. We must make the world safe for diversity, for peace, for cultural cooperation, and for international understanding. Our two nations are committed to the great task of building a world order based on the concept of law and the principle of justice. We are convinced that these principles will prevail and the world will enter into a new stage of peaceful cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, dear and respected friend. First of all, on behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, we welcome all of you and we wish you a very happy Teachers' Day. On this Teachers' Day, you know, the birthday of Dr. Sarpalli Radhakrishnan, a deep philosopher and a statesman, had touched lives as a teacher, philosopher, author, and politician. Let us pay our tribute to all our teachers and walk and meditate with the living thoughts of Dr. Sarpalli Radhakrishnan. On behalf of Swadhyay Sahchakra, Circle for Co-Learning and Mutual Studies, and on behalf of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, it is a great pleasure and indeed an honor to have available to us our distinguished guests and speakers. I welcome Professor Binod Kumar Agarwala, former Professor of Philosophy from Northeastern Hill University, Shillong. I welcome Professor Anant Kumar Giri, moderator and mentor of Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming. I welcome Dr. Gyan Gului, Minti Pradhanji, and all friends who present here. Dr. Binod Kumar Agarwala is a deep seeker and a great philosopher of our time. He nurtured philosophy many years in Northeastern Hill University. He has multidisciplinary orientation in his philosophical understanding, particularly understanding of Bhagavad Gita and Indian philosophy, and for that matter, travel philosophy. We welcome you, sir, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation. Let me also give a brief introduction of our Swadhyay Sahchakra circle. Swadhyay Sahchakra circle, in this circle, everybody is a teacher. It is a circle of co-learners. It is a circle of co-learning and mutual studies. It is an initiative of studying, learning together self, culture, societies, and the world. Friends associated with this are eager to work and mediate with new horizons of thinking and new movements of social and cultural change at work in our contemporary world. We study seekers such as Sri Aurobindo, Mahatma Gandhi, Chittaranjan Das, a creative thinker and creative soul from Odisha, and many others from around the world. We also present our own writings and reflect upon our creativity together. We also invite people from different walk of life, fields of life, to share with us their life's vision, sadhana, and a struggle for that matter, for creating a world of beauty and dignity and dialogue. We meet every Sunday or sometimes on Wednesday. We have collaborations with different universities in India and abroad, and we look for your kind participation in our circle. Today is a very special day. Today is a day dedicated to the teacher. As said by Kabir Das, a teacher and a philosopher's stones are distinguishable by the wise. The philosopher's stone turns the metal into gold, but a great teacher transforms his disciples and inspires them to reach the skies just like himself. On the eve of Teachers' Day, today we are going to remember and understand the sadhana's thought, visions, and teaching of Sarpalli Radhakrishnan. As you know, he is widely known as a distinguished 21st century scholar of comparative religions and philosophy. So, for a brief introduction of today's session, may I like to invite Professor Anant Kumar Giri to kindly give a brief thought or introduction of today's session. Yes, Giri, over to you.
Thank you so much, dear Randeep, and thank you, Professor Binod Kumar Agarwala, and all friends co-present today. So on this Teacher Day, in fact, every teacher is a learner, and Dr. Radhakrishnan brings to learning the whole work of the living spirit. Dr. Radhakrishnan's first work was on philosophy of Rabindranath Tagore, and he has also edited a book on Mahatma Gandhi on his 75th birthday. As Dr. Radhakrishnan has also written on 75th birthday of Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. And out of his many works, his work Bhagavad Gita, for example. Now, when we read Dr. Radhakrishnan's work on Bhagavad Gita, Dr. Radhakrishnan holds our hand and he helps us to realize Gita as a perennial wisdom and also to find similar perennial wisdom in other religious, spiritual, and philosophical traditions. It is not comparative philosophy in a simplistic sense. In fact, I was reading one of his lectures 2 days ago. In fact, yesterday early morning, he has a lecture called The Touch of the Universal. And in a very deep sense, Dr. Radhakrishnan's journey is a touch of the spiritual and the universal, but in our everyday life. For example, when he was ambassador to Moscow, and at that time it was a very difficult moment, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, so he could realize that none else than Dr. Radhakrishnan needs to be there and have a personal communication with Joseph Stalin. And when we read that meeting of Stalin and Radhakrishnan, tears comes to our eyes. And when Dr. Radhakrishnan meets Joseph Stalin and he touches him, and Stalin realizes for the first time somebody touches him as a human person, and it had a deep influence on Stalin, and towards the very end of his life he remembered that. One critical thought is that Dr. Radhakrishnan was the chairman of the Education Commission that was established shortly after independence of India. And there, in terms of direction of Indian education, now there was only one dissenting voice, that was from Arthur Morgan, who himself was a great educator. He founded Antioch College in the USA. Now it is a non-India who argued that the future universities of India needs to be located in colleges. But except Dr. Arthur Morgan, including Professor Radhakrishnan, nobody really took that seriously. So therefore, the predicament of contemporary Indian education, this disjunction between teachers and the life world, I think working and meditating with Dr. Radhakrishnan, we need to renew that spirit of learning where our own social location, as most of us or as Dr. Radhakrishnan taught in BHU and others, so how do we really be a teacher and learner and relate to our life world in ever communicative and spiritual ways? With this, it is a joy to welcome Professor Agarwala. And from now onwards, I request Ranveer to kindly nurture the conversation. I am co-participant, but as I am on the road, I request you to please.
Friends, I thank Professor Anantagiri and Randhir ji for giving me this opportunity to be with you on this occasion of the Teachers' Day. Yesterday, I received the call as well as the email that I should participate in this program on the occasion of Teachers' Day. So I thought that maybe I'll be required to speak for 10 minutes like previous year. Well, last year also the program was held, if I remember correctly, and I was one of the many, say, speakers. So I prepared accordingly for say 10 minutes and I accepted the invitation. But now, today in the morning, I realized that probably I am the only speaker and I have to deliver a longer speech for which I am really not prepared for two reasons. One is that I am not really very good in contemporary Indian philosophy. And also I am not an expert on Radhakrishnan's thinking or his neo-Vedantic philosophy. My interest in Radhakrishnan arose because I was studying Bhagavad Gita and his translation was one of the recommended translation of Bhagavad Gita with comments here and there. So I read it carefully, and that is how I came to know about the details of his writing, specifically writing on Bhagavad Gita. So I can at the most speak on his this book on Bhagavad Gita, the translation of Bhagavad Gita with say glosses here and there in that text itself. But let me say one thing. Radhakrishnan, through his inspired and inspiring exposition of Indian philosophy in English, popularized the subject in the Western world. And remember, everybody's writing has a context. And if we look out of context, then it looks different. His context was, say, independence struggle, and they are trying to, say, meet the challenge of the British thinkers who tried to denigrate the Indian mind, Indian philosophy, saying that it is nothing but mystical and it is not rational, etc., etc. So they cannot run their own country and they will not be able to, say, run the modern institution like state, etc. So it was that context. And in that context, Radhakrishnan, through his writings, through his lectures, tried to show that Indian philosophy is as good as Western philosophy and it can stand on its own uh, in front of the Western, thinking. So that was the context. Radhakrishnan succeeded through his writing to change the Western perception of Indian philosophy. He was one of the first thinkers to disentangle the strands of pure metaphysics from the complex web of received Indian philosophy. In his two volumes of Indian philosophy, he demonstrated that Indian philosophy is indeed philosophy, even though Indian thinkers did not admit the independent existence of different branches of philosophy like ethics, metaphysics, epistemology, and did not distinguish them clearly. These different strands of philosophical thought became discernible in his exposition of Indian philosophy. His two volumes of Indian philosophy secured for Indian philosophy its rightful place side by side with Western philosophy. And this I can say because in my postgraduate days, Indian philosophy was one of the papers. And as a part of that paper reading list, uh, Radhakrishnan's these two volumes are prescribed, and I read some portion of it. And I realized that his exposition is really as good as the exposition of Western philosophy, which I read in, say, Tilly or say other writers. So definitely his presentation of Indian philosophy succeeded in its mission. Radhakrishnan rationally reconstructed Vedanta as far as his own thinking is concerned, uh, which we recognize as a Neo Vedanta. In his Neo Vedanta, scripture was not a written text, but the eternal truth. Faith was not blind obedience, but response of the whole man, including assent of intellect and free will. For him, the absolute and the God were not mutually exclusive. Rather, the absolute represents the supreme in its transcendent and non-relational aspect, and the God represents the supreme in its cosmic uh, aspect. Radhakrishnan not only popularized Indian philosophy in the West, but also reinterpreted it for the Indians themselves. Let me not go into further details of each exposition or reinterpretation of Indian philosophy. As I said, that I am not really very conversant with the overall philosophy of Radhakrishnan or his interpretation of the entire Indian philosophy. After all, he translated Upanishads, and which I also consult often whenever I am required to say understand some say Upanishadic texts. There I consult Radhakrishnan, then Hume, Olivelle, other say translators of the text. Since I'm not really very good in say Sanskrit, so I rely on translation. And definitely Radhakrishnan is one of the say translators whom I consult. But after going through the various translations and looking at the Sanskrit text, I then decide myself as to its say correct meaning. So I often consult Radhakrishnan's text also whenever that is available to me as far as the translation of Indian texts are concerned. But now, as a teacher, let me engage a little critically with, say, Radhakrishnan's understanding of Bhagavad Gita, because that is the area which I am conversant with, and I have studied his translation, specifically this particular book, that is the Bhagavad Gita under the title Bhagavad Gita with an introductory essay, Sanskrit text, English translation, and notes. So my comments will be confined to that only. And my comment will be a little critical because his translation also needs a critical evaluation. Instead of just accepting it on its face value, we have to be little, say, skeptical and look at them critically, comparing them with the original Sanskrit text. And I will choose some of the examples that how he has understood. And here, his own remarks are very, very important. He once said, while the spirit of India can never die, the social institutions which do not embody it must be scrapped. So, naturally, he wrote, the system of caste, whether its historical significance has whatever its historical significance, has no contemporary value. Today, it injures the spirit of humanity and violates human dignity. If democracy is to be seriously implemented, then caste and untouchability should go. But as an exponent of spirit of India, there he writes, quote, while caste has resulted in much evil, there are some sound principles underlying it, unquote. So sound principles underlying the caste system. What are those sound principles? He wrote, referring to the system of four burners, quote, the fourfold classification is conceived in the interest of world progress. It is not intended especially for Hindus, but applies to the whole human race, which has one destiny, which it seeks and increasingly attains through countless millennium of history. It is a classification based on social facts and psychology. It is a mold into which all human beings can be poured according to their vocational aptitude and temperament, unquote. This kind of reading of the system of four burners is based on appeal to Rig Veda and Bhagavad Gita. That is the most surprising part of it, that he also appeals to both Rig Veda as well as Bhagavad Gita. It is doubtful if his reading of the classical Indian text can be taken at its face value, because when we read the relevant sukta, and there is only say two suktas where this issue of varnas is raised in say Vedas, specifically the Rig Veda, the Purusha Sukta, and that is Mandala 10, Sukta 90, and the verses 11, 12. I give the translation. When they divided the Purusha, how many portions did they make? What do they call his mouth, his arms? What do they call his thighs and feet? The Brahman was his mouth. Of both his arms was the Rajanya made. He doesn't, Rig Veda does not use the word Kshatriya, but Rajanya made. His thighs became Vaishya. From his feet, the Sudra was produced. And this is taken as the creation of Purusha. Therefore, it is something eternal dharma. But actually, Rig Veda did not call them eternal. Rather, Rig Veda described this as Tani Dharmani Prathamani Asan. That means these are the dharmas that first appeared, but that doesn't mean they will last or they will not be overtaken by the other dharmas. So this is in the Rig Veda itself. Now let us look at this Bhagavad Gita. When in Bhagavad Gita 4:13, Krishna says, Chatur Varnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasaha Tasya Kartaram Api Mam Vidhi Akartaram Apyayam. The system of four varnas has been created by me according to the divisions of gunas and karmas, though I am the agent thereof. Know me, non-agent and imperishable, unquote. Now here, even though, and this is taken as the sanctity of the four Varnas in, say, Bhagavad Gita, because it is the creation of God, therefore it is taken as something eternal, embodying eternal principle. But actually it is not so, because God has, in Bhagavad Gita, God has not only created, this Chaturvarnya, but also it has created everything in the world. But everything in the world, including man, trees, everything is perishable. Therefore, it automatically follows. And remember, there is a principle in Bhagavad Gita, Jatasya Dhruva Mrityu. That means whatever has been born, that will die. That means whatever has been created, that will be destroyed. So definitely, this system of fourfold varnas, which has been created by the God, that also in due course of time will be destroyed. So this is not to be taken as the eternal principle, or that it is something that is, say, sanctified by God's creation. So what I want to say is that maybe we have to look at what reading that is given by Radhakrishnan to the original text, both from the Rig Veda as well as the Bhagavad Gita, that needs re-look in light of the overall placing of these verses in the entire corpus. So that is one thing that I would like to mention. But there are some other suttas also. Krishna says that he has created Saswata Dharma, but this Saswata Dharma is not perishable Dharma like this Chaturvarnya. And we have to look for the principles which are those eternal dharmas, but not this say system of fourfold varnas at all. Now, when we look at the other verses also, I also find a little difficulty in accepting the translation that is given by, say, Radhakrishnan. Let me begin with a very simple verse, which I think everybody remembers and everybody reads, whoever is familiar with, say, Bhagavad Gita. That is, it is second chapter, verse 13. Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra na muhyati. And the translation of Radhakrishnan says, as the soul passes in this body through childhood, youth and old age, even so is its taking on of another body. The sage is not perplexed by this, unquote. And Radhakrishnan gives a note on this, that the human being makes himself fit for immortality by passing through a series of births and deaths. The changes in the body do not mean changes in the soul. None of its embodiment is permanent. That means he is reading some kind of transmigration of soul from body to body in these verses. But actually, that is little problematic, because let us read carefully. Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara praptir dhiras tatra namulyati. Now here, the important comparison is the way the state of the body is associated with the body. That means the childhood, the youth, and the old age. Now, these states of the body, the three states of the body, they are never dissociable from the body. This is what is implied automatically the moment we talk, the way the states of bodies are experienced in the body, they are never separated from the body, the states of the body. So where is the question of body being separated from the soul, so that soul transmigrates from one body to another body? That is very important. We have to keep this in mind, that what is the meaning that is present in the words themselves, the way the soul goes from one body to another, or rather experiences other bodies. It is like experiencing in the same body the various states of the body. Now there is a continuity. The continuity of the transition from the childhood to youth, and from youth to old age. There is no say demarcating line where one can say that now from this point onwards that we are no more in the childhood, but now we have entered youth. There is no such demarcating line. And these are not discrete states of the body, so that one goes, the other comes, say, immediately thereafter discretely. Rather, it is a continuous transition from childhood to youth to old age. That is what is mentioned in the text itself. Now, this continuity is not there in the traditional understanding of transmigration of the soul. The body dies and the soul migrates, keeps moving bodiless for some time, dissociated from the body until it acquires, or at least the God decides it to associate with another body. Now, this kind of imagery does not fit what this text is saying. So this inseparability and continuity of the transition is not satisfied by the individual soul transmigrating from one body to another. Then which body is this? Which transmigration is this in the verse that is spoken of? Now, this is actually the preparation in the Bhagavad Gita, and which is there in the entire, say, Vedic philosophy from which Bhagavad Gita borrows, that this is the conception of the collective soul. And this collective soul is always with a collective body politic. All the bodies, they are of the collective soul, because the collective soul is in every body, and every body belongs to that collective soul. Now, once we realize this, then suddenly the verse becomes meaningful. This principle of dissociability of the soul from the body does not arise, and the principle of continuity is still maintained. And because this death of people, this does not abruptly change the body politic, because some die and the body continues and new people are born. And this is a continuous process. This is not discrete, abrupt, so that suddenly the body politic changes to something else. All of a sudden, the entire body politic is different from the previous body politic. It never happens. So the question of discreteness does not arise, and similarly dissociation from the collective body politic also does not arise, because it is always with somebody or the other, because even if some die, some are born and some are still say alive, and that collective soul is still with that. So this was actually the introduction of the idea of the collective soul with the collective body. But somehow, following the tradition, Radhakrishnan translated it the way the tradition has understood. I will say that we have not delved deep into the meaning of the words of each verse that is there in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, let me go into another verse, which is also a related verse, which also everybody say remembers. Please let me know when my time is up, so that I can stop. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
So, So please let me know when the time is up so that I can wind up my discussion. Let me just continue with this another verse from Bhagavad Gita, that is same second chapter, verse 22. Basansi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grinati naro aparani tatha sarirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi. And Radhakrishnan's translation of this verse is like this, quote, just as a person casts off worn out garments and puts on others that are new, even so does the embodied soul cast off worn out bodies and take on others that are new. And his note says, quote, the eternal does not move from place to place, but the embodied soul moves from one abode to another. It takes birth each time and gathers to itself a mind, life, and body formed out of materials of nature according to its past evolution and its need for the future. The psychic being is the Vijnana, which supports the triple manifestation of body, that is Anna, life, Prana, and mind, Manas. When the gross physical body falls away, the vital and mental seeds still remain as the vehicle of the soul. Rebirth is a law of nature. There is an objective connection between various forms of life. So this is how he explained. That means he accepts once again this cycle of birth and death for the jiva, as well as the law of karma that is involved in that. It is because of the previous karma that we acquire the new body and enjoy or suffer according to our previous actions. But does this really say that? Let me point out, in Radhakrishnan's kind of understanding, firstly, a man can move naked after discarding old garments, but before acquiring the new ones. Similarly, the individual Jivatman can also move ontologically separated from the body to acquire a new body. Secondly, every individual Jivatman has to suffer a series of movements from one body at a time to another body at a time, forming a cycle of birth and death of individual Jivatman. We have already seen the example of the Deha with its changing states, that is in the previous verse that we discussed, which precisely emphasized that we are not to think of Dehin as existing ontologically separated from Deha ever, contrary to what is admitted by thinkers like Radhakrishnan, who accept the theory of transmigration of Jivatman due to operation of law of karma. A man may be without cloth, that is, he may be naked, but Dehin is not without a Deha ever, according to the Bhagavad Gita, due to analogy of Deha and its changing states. Dehin's being is like that of the numbers. Even though a number is distinct from the same number of things, yet number is not separable from the same number of things. Even if these things perish, the number is present in another same number of things. Even though traditional commentators have unanimously read Bhagavad Gita 2:22 as regarding the Jivatman and its body, their reading is erroneous, as these are dictated not by logic of the verse, but by their prior commitment to the cycle of birth and death of individual Jivatman in samsara governed by the law of karma. All traditional commentators take the analogy of Deha and its states, itself and its body, as merely to highlight that as one state of Deha gives way to another state, and for passing away of the earlier state of the body, we do not grieve because the individual self remains unchanged through the changing states of body. In the similar way, one body of the self gives way to another, and the individual self remains unchanged while passing from one body to another. Hence, we should not grieve for the old discarded body. This kind of reading of the verse is erroneous because the traditional commentators have not taken into consideration the fact that if the verse is regarding the individual Jivatman and its body, and the change of the body of the Jivatman is beyond his control, as the change of state of body is due to law of karma, then one has failed to notice what is present in 222. Here, the old bodies are said to be discarded by the self as voluntarily as the discarding of the old cloth by man. Now, this voluntarism, this is not present at all. Hello,
Yes, sir. Yes.
should I continue?
Yes, yes.
I'll just end with one more verse, and that will be the end of it.
Okay.
One on the changing state, there is no control of the Jivatman, and one is likely to transfer the uncontrollability to Dehin over their relation completely, as it was done by the commentators, as he admitted that Jivatman is bound to be associated and dissociated from a body and reassociated by law of karma, over which he has no control. But from the analogy in 222, this feature of uncontrollability of changing states of there was meant to be discounted, as the author, through another analogy, that is the analogy of discarding old garments by man, brought by the author Veda Vyasa to introduce some element of voluntarism in 222. Now, regarding discarding and acquiring of the body by the Dehi. So, which say body and which self can have this kind of voluntarism, and that is the collective body politics. Remember, when it sends to war, it is sending bodies for its say destruction. So it is discarding the old body. So that voluntarism is there in the collective body politics, and war is not an individual's effort at all. The voluntarism inherent in 222 has not been taken into consideration by Radhakrishnan, as he cannot even admit it due to operation of law of karma assumed by him. If he admits voluntarism of Dehin over body inherent in 222, then not only law of karma will go away, but also the claim that 222 is regarding the Jivatman and its body will have to be discarded, because no commentator can admit to so much power of the Jivatman to discard or assume its body voluntarily. And if Vulgate 222 is not about Jivatman and its body, then it also cannot be the case that 213 is about Jivatman and its body, because these two verses, they are say interrelated say verses. There is one more feature present in the analogy in 222, which has not been taken into consideration by Radhakrishnan. The expression Naro and Dehi are in singular, but expression Basansi Jirnani, Navani, Aparani, Sarirani, Jirnani, Anyani, Navani are in plural, indicating that man has many old garments which he discards and acquires many new garments, and similarly, a single Dehin has many old bodies which he discards and acquires many new bodies. This feature of having many bodies at a time, like a man having many garments, is satisfied by the collective self or a collective person, but not by individual Jivatma. The traditional thinkers, having committed to the cycle of birth and death of Jiva under control of law of karma, assume that multiplicity of bodies of Dehin is due to sequentially discarded or acquired bodies, but one at a time, and then account for the multiplicity of garments of a man in the same way. But this is not natural reading, as it is reading backwards, as if the issue under discussion is the garments of man, which is to be understood in analogy to the bodies of individual Jivatman, which are sequentially acquired and discarded one at a time in the cycle of birth and death under the law of karma. But that is not the issue at all. The issue is that of discarding and acquiring, not acquiring and discarding of many bodies by a single Dehin, which has to be understood in analogy to discarding and acquiring of many garments by man. Then natural reading is that the Dehin is the collective self or person, and who discards many old bodies by sending old men from the collective body politic and acquires many new bodies by inducting many new men in the collective body politic. So the traditional commentators are not equally faithful to the nuances of the terms in the verses and syntax of the verse due to their prior doctrinal commitment, which prevent them from seeing the meaning present in terms and syntax of the verse. So I think I should better stop here and leave some time for if there is any session of question and answer and for others to interact. So thank you very much.
Uh, Thank you so much, Professor Agarwal. As always, very deep and very thought-provoking in your deliberations. And you touched almost all important aspects of Radhakrishnan's philosophy, particularly his, I think your uh, deliberation and your lecture invites us to understand the greatness of Radhakrishnan as a greatest interpreter of Indian philosophy. The particularly the verses that you have explained to us is very, very thought-provoking, and that is very important in the whole understanding. So I think we have so many important participants here. So first, I would like to invite Professor Gyan Gului to share his thought. And dear and respected friend, if you have any question, please indicate me in the chat box, or you can also write it down in the chat box. So first, I would like to invite Professor Gyan Gului, and he has recently did very excellent work on Gandhi's interpretation of Bhagavad Gita. So yes, Professor Gyan Gului, over to you.
Very much. I hope I am audible. Thank you very much. It was really very interesting. Well, it is not so easy to speak of Radhakrishnan because, well, we could speak for centuries, I think, because he's so rich as a thinker. Is also so. I was thinking now that he, for instance, this is only particular. He had noticed, and he was one of the first ones, the similarities between some aspects of the Upanishads and some aspects of the ancient Greek thought. For instance, as regards the chariot image in Plato's Phaedrus and the chariot image in the third valley of the Katha Upanishad. For instance, this is only particular, but it can, in my opinion, explain very, very well the degree of attention of Radhakrishnan as philologist and also as philosopher, and also as a researcher and as an analyst of both traditions, because it is not so usual that the same person can be so profound in interpreting both the ancient Greek thought and the Indian cultural heritage. It is really very rare. And of course, this is a ground more for admiration in relation to Radhakrishnan. I myself would perhaps say that I was among the different aspects of Radhakrishnan. I was, for instance, very, very surprised, amazed, and I found it really marvelous the way in which he began to defend the Indian cultural heritage already from his bachelor work. I think it is the bachelor work. The title is "The Ethics of the Vedanta and Its Metaphysical Presuppositions," because this was both, so to speak, an interpretation of the text, of course, and was also a program of reinterpretation of the Indian cultural heritage against all who said, well, in the Vedanta there is no ethics. The Vedanta have furnished no basis for ethics. And he says against this mentality and this interpretation, not at all. The Vedanta is also a text of ethics. That is, he had nearly from the very beginning of his career as students, and then thereafter, of course, as philosopher and as a researcher, as professor, of course. But here he was nearly at the beginning of his studies. And he had the courage to go against a tradition which devalued and which did not consider the profundity and the depth of the Vedanta for the ethics too. And this was nearly an aspect of Radhakrishnan, which always has particularly filled me with admiration for him, because I do not think that at that time this kind of interpretation against our tradition of the Western civilization, which pretended to say, well, we are those who have founded ethics, we have the foundation of ethics, and ethics has not at all to do with the Vedanta. This was not to contrapose alone against this tradition was really not so simple, not so simple, because Radhakrishnan was at the beginning of his studies. So I would like to underline this point, but of course, as I said, well, Radhakrishnan is so rich that I cannot really limit to one aspect of his philosophy, of his meditation. There is, of course, the question of the perennial philosophy, which is really very interesting, for instance, and which is also a point on which there is also a grounds for meditation and for elaboration of a thought, and of course of meditation on the concept as such of the perennial philosophy. And so well, I would say, like very much to thank you very much for your brilliant exposition and interpretation of Radhakrishnan, and I thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Amitav Shukla. Dr. Amitav Shukla, you have raised your right hand. So if you have any question. Vasudev Paul is asking what is the basic concept of philosophy of Dr. Radhakrishnan. So this is a very simple but deep question. Yes, Minti Pradhanji, please ask your question. And then we'll go to...
Hello, can I say something just instead
Yes,
of asking a question? Yeah. I hope I'm audible. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So today in this auspicious day of Guru Divas, I wish everyone happy Teachers Day, to all my teachers, to all the teachers over there. And I pay my tribute to all the iconic teachers of Indian history, like Dr. Radhakrishnan, Swami Vivekanand, Ravindranath Tagore, not to forget Savitribai Phule, and Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam. So I would like to quote something from Raman Maharshi's quote. This quote: how can one know the nature of the Guru if one does not know one's own real nature or real self? If you want to know the real nature of the Guru, you must first learn to look upon the whole world as a Guru Rupa. I mean to look around, and one must see Guru in all living being, unquote. So according to Radhakrishnan, actually, it was science and philosophy he had that intellectual aspirations. So science was the intellectual approach, and the philosophy was the intuitive approach. In ancient knowledge, we say Vidya, no? The Vidya was all about Atmagyan or self-realization. But in Western philosophy, it was like empirical and rationalistic. So I don't know, Radhakrishnan always said that logical knowledge was avidya. I mean, non-knowledge. Probably it meant that the logical intellectual mind possesses only the obstacles in understanding. You understand only logic. We don't think beyond. But when you purify the mind and annihilate the ego, so the intuitive knowledge actually really manifests. In our Indian or Hindu philosophy, we can say that the intuitive knowledge is the knowledge of self. It helps us to understand the ultimate truth about our true nature. And this is we call divinity, and it operates in a super conscious level. So this self-knowledge is self-analytical, we can say. When this when this intellect is in the logical awareness of human mind happens. So the intuition-based wisdom is at its purest, you can tell. Even though that Radhakrishnan did not believe that only acquiring knowledge is enough, because he always believed that it is beyond academic and profession. But still, no, that intuition is not opposite to intellect. It is rather actually it is beyond it, lies beyond it. So I can tell this much. It is no. So intuition is self-establishing, self-evidencing, unitary, and eternal. But the question is now, I want to ask this question to Anant Bhai. How can we bridge the gap between this Western philosophy and the Radhakrishnan way of believing our Eastern philosophy or in the educational field? And I thank Professor Binod Kumar Agarwal for his very deep presentation. I mean, I don't have knowledge to question anything about Gita, so I just want to ask this simple question. And thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Minteji. Very deep comment. Yes, Basudev Paul ji wants to ask something. Okay, somebody text.
Yes, Paul speaking. Good evening, Randir Saab.
Thank you, thank you.
Actually, I have been amateurish. On looking your passport and all, I opened, and the discussion going on was very deep actually. And I am oppositional in my attitude. That does not mean I want to doubt anybody's question, but rather I want to learn more and more from the discussion. And any discussion should be directed so that it gives some new dimension. So from that perspective, I want to say something. T.S. Eliot also spoke about the meaninglessness of life, both in the wasteland and the volumen. And Dr. Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, he says, and it's a philosophy, that purposelessness of life is not a good sign. If anybody finds in it the meaninglessness of life, then you will be socially impoverished. And how to come out this impoverishment, that is the question. And my humble question to learn more, so what is the basic concept of philosophy of Radhakrishnan, please?
Okay, thank you. I request Binod. Yes, I request Binod Agrawalji to please note down all these questions. And somebody also text me in the chat box. Perhaps he forget to text for everyone, but he privately text me. He said, what is his idea of creative freedom? You know, the invocation song that a speech that I played in the very beginning itself. There in his speech in Moscow, Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan invoked one new kind of freedom, that is creative freedom. What does it mean? And whether it has something to do with the conception that he used in his book called Heritage, Abhagya, Ahimsa, or Asanga, you know, these three type of. So now I can invite, yes. Yes, no, may I invite Dr. Jarnail Singh Anand? He's a very creative poet from Punjab. So, sir, over to you. If you have any question, please ask or comment for that matter. You are cordially invited. He's taking some time. Yes, may I invite Anantagiri? Yes,
Hello.
Yes. Yes. You are audible, sir. Janal, sir. Yes. Please ask.
Oh, thank you. I am thankful to you, Randhirji, to make me audible to the great assembly here of scholars. It is a Teachers' Day today, and we are celebrating it with reference to our great teacher, Dr. Radhakrishnan ji. And we pay our tribute to our teachers who have done such a good to our society, worked hard for its betterment. What we are celebrating? There was a great man, and I want to focus on we have none other to match his acumen and his vision. Why has our present been drained of great ideas and great idealists? I want to focus on this problem. What are our efforts to reignite the fire of knowledge? And what type of knowledge? What type of knowledge is going on? The knowledge that destroyed man's innocence and has become a grave threat to birds, beasts, waters, and nature. What our universities are teaching? Are we teaching creative thought? You were just talking of creative freedom. So my question is, are we teaching creative thought? We want to redo knowledge that is already available. This is what we are doing. Something is available and we are studying it. We are researching on it instead of doing something new. We are doing research, but shy away from innovative thought, creative freedom, as you were talking. But great men like Dr. Radhakrishnan believed in creative thought, and I can say creative freedom, a new vision for humanity. That is why they wanted what they wanted, what type of education they wanted, men steeped in humanism, which we do not teach at all in our universities. There are universities which have no department in English, in Punjabi, in humanities. We don't teach liberal humanities to our students. What we want to make them? We want to make them automatons. Will they help in carrying forward the message of humanity, which our great people, great forefathers have held high, at the love for creation? Where is the love for creation? Today, again, we need to reinvent that scholarship, that if we want a U-turn, I want that we should take a U-turn towards humanism, towards goodness, towards values, which are absolutely missing from our present system thought of education which is going on. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And I can recall when Radhakrishnan told that the university may provide us with scientific training, scientific equipment. They may give all the knowledge that we have, but that knowledge should become illuminate and it must become lustrous. So, and that is why he wrote a very important text called The Mind of Mahatma Gandhi, and UNESCO also republished that book, and that's very important. And when you say that our education system is very much based on material interest of life rather than creating amusements and creative freedom. So with this, I think Anand sir is traveling. Yes, Professor Gri, over to you. Can you speak, or you are traveling somewhere? Ananta bhai, he is taking some time. So Professor Agarwala sir, over to you, please. Help us understanding all this.
Thanks. these questions were of such nature that probably I am not in a position to answer them, because as I said in the very beginning, that I am not an expert of either the contemporary Indian philosophy or say Radhakrishnan's philosophy. So questions like what is his basic philosophy? Uh, well, I have heard the name that Neo-Vedanta, but what exactly is this nuance that is introduced in this Neo-Vedanta? Well, I cannot explain, because I know a little bit of Vedanta through my postgraduate studies, as well as little bit of Shankara's interpretation of Bhagavad Gita, that I can explain. But what is this new aspect of the Vedanta that has been introduced by, say, Radhakrishnan, that I will not be in a position to say explain. Similarly, this kind of general say characterization like intuitive versus rational, or the Indian philosophy is intuitive. Well, I have nothing to say on this, because definitely this is how it has been characterized in the textbooks, as well as I also have studied. But there are very many characteristics which distinguish the Indian thought from the Western thought. And one of the important aspect for me, and that is there from the very beginning, is that the Indian thought has espoused from the very beginning both the collectivist thinking as well as individualistic thinking. Like the Vedic thought is always a collectivist thought. This idea of Brahman, Purusha, all these are collectivist ideas. While the Buddha and Jain ideas, they are individualistic ideas. Therefore, they believe in this law of karma, that as the individual performs action, he will reap its consequences, and that is individualistic. Individualism is built into their very, say, conception. So both individualism as well as collectivism is present in, say, Indian, say, thinking. So intuitive also one aspect, rationalism is also very much there. After all, there is a system of debate, and in light of debate, the systems have improved by the, say, series of thinkers, whichever system we take, whether we take Advaita Vedanta or we take Nyaya or say Sankhya, well, it has enriched through mutual debate. So rationalism also is very much there. Now, as far as this creative freedom and creative thought is concerned, well, one of the Prama Lakshana is Anadhigatata as well as Apurvata. If we go by Vedanta, then it is Anadhigatata. And if we go by Nyaya, then it is Apurvata. Now, Apurvata means that what was not known before. And similarly, Anadhigat also means what was not known, say, earlier, it was not Adhigata, say, earlier. So that means something new has to emerge. Then only it will be, say, knowledge, Prama, that will be Prama. And remember, the text, Sabda Pramana, the text that we have inherited from our tradition, these are our Pramana. And from this Pramana, when we try to get the Prama, then that Anadhigatata has to be there, Apurvata has to be there. Without that, I don't think we'll be merely repeating the words, the same words, but without really understanding what is there. Unless that is characterized by this Anadhigatata and Apurvata, that means something new has to be there in your presentation of the interpretation of the earlier text. But if it is merely repetition, then it is not acceptable. So that creativity is built in the very conception of Prama in, as a Indian thinking. But creativity will not degenerate into any kind of, say, writing a novel or a story. That is not the kind of creativity, but this is a creativity of a different. So this is what I will briefly say as my reaction to the various questions which have been asked, or the observations which have been made, though they are not directly related to, say, the presentation that I made. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, Ananta Bhai, are you there? I think he is taking some time. Yes, Miniti ji, please offer the vote of thanks. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah, thank you, Randir. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, yes.
Uh, I, Minati Pradhan, on behalf of Swadhyaya Sahachakra and the Vishwaneedam Center for Asian Blossoming, would like to thank everybody. I would like to thank our Chief Speaker, Professor Binod Kumar Agarwalji, for his enlightening us with his deep work on Bhagavad Gita and answering our many queries. Thank you, sir. I would like to thank our moderator, Professor Anant Kumar Giri, for arranging this type of webinar for all of us to learn and introspect. So thank you, Ananta Bhai. I would like to thank our Professor Gyan Luigi, as always, for his deep, insightful thought and present and participation. Thank you, Gyan Luigi. I would also like to thank today two new participants like Mr. Vasudev Paul for his very critical thinking and sharing his views on our platform. And I would also like to thank Dr. Janal Singh Anand for his very, very valuable inputs about the creative freedom. Thank you, sir. We are lucky to listen to you today. Thank you so much. At the last and not the least, I would like to thank our convener, Randir Kumar Gautam, for putting his blood and sweat, I must say, to execute all the webinars. Thank you, Randir. Thank you for everything. And I would like to thank all our Zoom and Facebook platform participants for participating, listening, and making it successful. And pardon me if I have forgotten anybody's name. And I thank you all. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much. Happy Teachers Day.